Amy Nichols was a powerful woman. She was 45 and a single business owner with a keen eye for maximizing profits, but one thing was missing in her life. Amy was lonely and not for the love of a man. Because of her persistent perfectionism, no man was able to live up to her lofty standards. Amy even thought she would never have children naturally since she had worked so hard to maintain her appearance. This never bothered her because she knew she did not need a man to be a successful mother. Amy began contacting the local orphanage and scheduled multiple appointments to look for a child to call her own. After several walkthroughs, one child in particular stood out to her. He was 10 years old, named Caden, whose parents had died in a house fire when he was 5. He had sandy blonde hair and piercing blue eyes and was a very talented artist for such a young child. The workers at the orphanage all said he was intensely quiet, and it was clear to Amy that Caden was the perfect child for her. She filled out all the appropriate paperwork and paid the extensive fees required for the adoption. Caden packed his little belongings, and for the first time since coming to the orphanage, he smiled. From the moment he stepped into his new home, Caden was given the best clothes, toys, and expensive art supplies money could buy. The two of them bonded immediately, and Amy even started taking Caden to work with her. One thing that Amy confided in her new son was that she was always worried about her looks, being a woman of a certain age. She was always looking to make sure that wrinkles had not set in or that her jawline was not sagging, and Caden was often the mirror to her, telling her that he did not see any of those concerns. After 6 months together, the mother and son pair were inseparable. But it was also around this time Amy began noticing that the crow's feet around her eyes were more pronounced and her neck started to jiggle. She thought her lips were beginning to thin. There was only one option to fix these unsettling developments: plastic surgery. She had one of her best friends, Maxine, watch Caden as she met with a local surgeon to plan out her procedures. Ultimately, Amy decided to have a minor facelift for her wrinkles and neck, some injectable fillers to erase the crow's feet and make her lips larger, and lastly, a nose job. The doctor admitted he preferred doing the procedures in separate visits, but Amy ensured she got all of her procedures done on the same day with a little financial persuasion. A few days later, Maxine was babysitting Caden as Amy went in for her procedures. Maxine noticed Caden was withdrawn and his drawings were different, darker. When she asked about his sudden mood change, Caden said he loved his mother, but he did not like how obsessed she had become with her looks. His old mommy and daddy were so obsessed with their looks that they dyed his hair all the time to keep it blonde and made him exercise just to stay skinny. He looked Maxine in the eyes and said that was why they burned to death in the fire. Maxine was slightly frightened by Caden's implications. Had he killed his original parents because they were so vain? Meanwhile, Amy was across town going under anesthesia so the doctor could perform her procedures. Every cut from his scalpel helped Amy regain the beauty to which she desperately clung. After hours of cutting, pulling, stitching, and injecting, Amy was taken to a recovery room and was eventually released to go home. When Amy walked into the house, Maxine ran to her before she could see Caden. Maxine warned Amy about her conversation with Caden and how he had practically admitted to killing his parents because they were obsessed with beauty. Amy scoffed at the remarks, knowing that Caden was her perfect little. At that moment, Caden came around the corner from his bedroom and saw Amy standing there. She asked for a hug, but he recoiled in absolute fear, running and screaming to his bedroom, locking the door behind him. Amy tried to talk to him, but he refused, calling her a monster just like his other mommy. When he finally came out of his room, Caden just stared at her with soulless eyes full of hatred. Her little angel had become her little devil. After Caden went to bed, Amy took her pain medications and a sedative to help her rest. She settled into bed and within minutes was sound asleep. Her dreams were riddled with images of her sweet little Caden twisted into a vicious, sadistic creature. She snapped awake only to find herself bound to her bed, the noxious smell of gasoline permeating the room. Caden stood in the moonlight and he began to tell her about his old mommy and daddy and how they always burned his scalp with bleach and the numerous times his daddy made him run laps because he ate a pack of gummy bears at school. Caden told her he was tired of this world's morbid fascination with looks and that just like his mommy and daddy, Amy and the rest of the world needed to burn for their actions. Before she could react, Caden lit a match and tossed it across the room, running to the front yard to watch his work unfold. Amy struggled in her restraints and realized that Caden had not tied the ropes that well. Frantically, she twisted and contorted her hands until one was free and rushed to untie the remaining ropes as the fire quickly engulfed the room. Amy crawled out of the room and rushed to the back door, knowing that Caden was potentially waiting to kill her if she were to escape through the front. She quietly ran to the house behind hers and banged on the front door. Her neighbors let her in and she called the cops. When they arrived at the house with the fire department close behind, the beautiful home was a raging inferno, and Caden was still out front watching with a gleeful smile on his face. The neighbors walked Amy over, and as she was telling them what happened, she looked over to see Caden being lowered into the police car. The most chilling memory she had of that night was the look of unfettered rage in his eyes. In that instant, she knew she never wanted a child again. At 21 years old and 5.5 feet tall, I weighed 300 pounds. This meant I carried with me about 150 pounds of extra body weight, and it was, according to the doctors, slowly killing me. My doctors prescribed a strict diet and exercise routine, which was a problem because I bingeed as a way to deal with anxiety, and I was a naturally anxious person. I dropped out of school that year and decided to focus on my body, but the real reason I wanted to get in shape was David. David was a classmate of mine. At the top of his class, he was smart and kind. When I saw him for the first time, my heart skipped a beat. I sat next to him, and while the others would make nasty comments about me, he was always kind. When I dropped out, he was the only one to reach out and ask if I was okay. We texted often, but now that I think about it, I was always the one who initiated our conversations. One day, after the first month of my sabbatical, I finally gathered up the nerve to ask him out. He rejected me, obviously. He implicitly let me know that he didn't want me texting him again. He was polite, but I understood the message. As part of my recovery, I had to go to the gym, and although I was no longer enrolled in school, I still had access to an on-campus gym that was frequented by the students. I felt horrible walking in. I felt everyone stare at me. It was like being at the center of a carnival freak show. And that's when I saw him. He left a kettlebell on the station and turned to grab a bottle of water. A girl approached him, almost no fat in her, huge breasts, and her butt looked incredible in those skin-tight leggings. Not to mention her face was gorgeous, a picture of perfection. I thought she may have been an instructor, but then she was in his arms and they were kissing. A gorgeous couple. I tried to keep to myself, but David noticed me and waved hi. I waved back and she saw it. She came to my treadmill with 2 more girls and they started harassing me. She was like a territorial animal, and when she realized who I was, she turned to the offensive. Surely David had mentioned our texting. They started making fun of me, publicly, and everyone around started laughing at me. I was crying. I looked at David to try and get him to intervene, but his girlfriend told me to stop staring at her man. Then one of her friends made me trip as I walked on the treadmill, and I went face first into the ground. The band of the treadmill pulled me back and I was shot to the floor. I rolled around it, causing the entire gym to burst out laughing. I ran out the door in tears. This event sent me into a depressive episode that I saw no way of recovering from. I came to learn her name was Alexandra and she was a freshman at the university. It had been 6 months since then, and the ghost of the humiliation I suffered followed me everywhere. I was on my way back from McDonald's. I carried with me half a dozen burgers and sodas and fries. The guy at the counter thought I was going to a party, but these were only for me. On my way home, I walked down a dark street. I would have usually taken the main street, but there had been new developments in the area, and it was under construction. I'd never been in the alley before, but it was a shortcut and it was more peaceful. That's when I saw the sign. It was a cosmetics place of sorts. It was dingy and ugly, but the man sitting at the front desk had a kind face. I kept walking, but he called out to me, and I turned around. He offered me a chance, and we talked for a long while about my experience at the gym, about seeing how everyone else was so much more beautiful than me, and about how I wanted to be like that girl from the gym. I wanted to replace her, to destroy her. The doctor smiled and said, "There is nothing that my scalpel cannot fix." I should have turned away, but I stayed. The surgeries were long and complicated. The doctor was cheap, cheaper than anyone should be, but it was all I could afford. Most of the surgeries were made to remove fat and readjust the skin. It was better than working out at the gym. Then the face surgeries came a few months later. Eternal sessions of pain. The anesthetic never quite worked, and I was trapped under the blade for hours on end, trying not to scream as the doctor smiled with evil glee. By the time the doctor was finally done with me, after my 13th plastic surgery, I looked in the mirror and I was happy to see I had completely transformed myself. I was no longer the sad, lonely loser I'd always known. I had become Alexandra. The resemblance was uncanny. I felt powerful, strong. It was time for me to make a move on David, but how was I to replace her? I grabbed my backpack and loaded it with the necessary tools. I followed her outside her gym. I saw David, gorgeous as ever, getting into his car and driving away. Alexandra got on her bicycle and rode away. I was behind her, far enough away that she wouldn't hear me. She took a corner, and I ran through the woods to intercept her. This was the street where it was supposed to happen. It was a dark road with no houses, connected to the forest. I intercepted her, and she fell from her bike. When she saw me, she had this confused look on her face. Confusion gave way to a sort of amusement, and she began to laugh. "Oh my God, it's you!" She recognized me. How would she recognize me? "Look at yourself, piggy. No matter what you do, you'll never be like me." She mocked me, making pig sounds. As if it were a sword, I pulled a pipe from my bag. She immediately stopped laughing. "What the hell?" she tried to ask, but I descended on her, straddling her like a horse and beating her face with the pipe. She cried out in pain, howled, and begged for mercy as I beat her down. Once I could no longer hear her screams, I stopped. The day after I went straight to the gym. I wore Alexandra's skimpiest outfit, and many people at the gym said, "Hi, Alex," as they passed me by. I got to David and I wrapped my arms around his neck. We kissed. It was everything I ever wanted. Soft but rich and lovely. I could feel his love for me, his warmth, but when we separated and he saw me, he was shocked. "You?" he asked. He started to ask where was his girlfriend, but I was sure I was Alex. Why would he say that to me? People were turning around, and before I knew it, I was screaming madly in tremendous pain. I grew angry at the world, at the people I knew, at myself, but above all else, angry at David, at his constant rejection. I took one of the dumbbells and ran at him, smashing it in his face. It's been 10 years since. The people at the asylum won't let me go. They say I am still a danger to others. They tell me David survived, although he needed about as much plastic surgery as me in order to fix the damage. I still resent them for not accepting my identity. I was never that fat loser girl. Alexandra is not dead, and I never killed anyone. Because I am Alexandra. I am Alexandra. I am Alexandra.